welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how's it going?
It's going fantastic today, Tim. Thanks so much for asking. I hope the listeners are doing fantastic as well. Our guest that we have on today is a returned guest. We haven't had her on in a long time, but when she was on, we were always so happy to have her. She always gave us such great moments in these true crime topics that we cover, and we let her know that a little bit in this episode, in this conversation, which is really unique. And I was super excited because the way the conversation sort of generated on our end was really organic. Like, we didn't think that we were going to be talking about this until she said that this was something that she was working on, and we're like, oh, that's really cool. But anyway, what's going to be really cool is finding out how you're doing. How are you today?
Doing great over here. Thanks a lot for asking. And yeah, we are joined by researcher and old friend Maryanne White for a great conversation speaking about serial killers, specifically Dennis Rader, otherwise known as BTK, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer. And we're speaking about them in the context of their trials and if they spoke at all during their sentencing or at any point during their trial. And if so, what did they say? And this is an idea that I guess kind of came to us because it was right after the victim impact statements in the Brian Kohberger case. So we speak about that a little bit in this conversation, as well as sort of like a baseline on these other killers because it's so fresh in everyone's minds. And then we go back in time a little bit and speak about these statements that BTK, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer made at their trials.
Right, and you did mention Kohberger. That is happening, in the current day, and it is a great backdrop for what we're talking about because he is a blank canvas. He is a stone-faced blank canvas during these incredibly powerful, emotional, rage-filled, at times, family impact statements. And a lot of our fascination is coming from how he can maintain that composure without any break. And that's how it started with Maryanne. She was like, well, when you look at Ted Bundy, and he represented himself, and he was like the showman. So yeah, we really opened up this box of curiosity for us. Like, how do they and why do they say what they say? What are they looking for? How are they trying to manage the control of the situation right up until their sentencing and beyond? So really fascinating stuff, and take whatever you want from it, but there's a lot to learn here.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and we're joined by researcher Maryann White, who's got a great background in exactly what we're speaking about. So big thanks to Maryann for joining us in this conversation. So we hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think on YouTube or Spotify.
And you know what? Let us know what you think in person if you happen to be at CrimeCon in Denver, Colorado this year, September 5th, 6th, and 7th. Tim and I are going to be there. You can be there as well. You can be there for 10% off your standard badge if you go to crimecon.com and put in the code Crawlspace at checkout for 10% off your standard badge. And it's not just going to be you and me, Tim. We're going to have a guest. We're doing a session with I believe you called him a silver fox?
Yeah, distinguished silver fox Joseph Scott Morgan is going to be joining us for a panel at CrimeCon 2025 to speak about the New England serial killer phenomenon. And I can't really stop at killer because it's a ghost. We don't know if there's a killer or not, but it sure is a story, and it definitely is a phenomenon that we have been speaking about on these airwaves and are going to continue to speak about at CrimeCon. So we hope to see you there.
And Tim, I've been hearing the word on the street about this bonus show that we've been doing. It's been catching on. There's a lot of momentum building here. What's going on with this? The bonus show?
Yeah, so we have a subscription service that everyone can sign up for. We have it on Apple Podcasts, we have it on Patreon, and on YouTube as well. And you can subscribe and you can get this bonus show. And so far we've done 2 in the first 2 weeks of its existence. So we may end up doing 1 a week. I don't know. It's going to be at least 2 bonus shows a month. So you can check it out. Subscribe to CSM Premium on Apple Podcasts, Patreon, or YouTube.
Thank you for telling me all about that. I had no idea.
Yes, I'm sure you didn't know. Okay, everyone. We're going to break quick for commercial here, and we'll be right back with Maryanne White. welcome back to the podcast, Maryanne White. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing wonderful. We're doing fantastic because I never thought I would hear welcome back to the podcast, Maryanne White. You're back. It's so great.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It has been a while. We've had so much fun with you when you came on the show before. You had so many good research documents and so much good insight into these mysterious, tragic, baffling cases that we cover on the show. But I think we got to back up a little bit and maybe reintroduce yourself to the audience. Let them know a little bit about you, what you do, maybe just what brought you to the show in the first place. But we got a really cool topic today. Very excited about this.
I'm excited about it too. Yeah. So my name is Maryanne White. I have my PhD in criminal justice and criminology. I'm currently an associate professor of criminal justice and criminology here in Georgia. I enjoy all things true crime, like a lot of people, but I have kind of always been interested in criminology and victimology and understanding criminals. And I kind of tend to lean more into the cases that some people tend to shy away from. But I have done a lot of research on serial killers and this kind of psychological aspects of crime and criminals. So I enjoy looking into these cases and trying to find out more information, and then also spreading the word on a lot of these cases to the public, especially since true crime has grown so much in recent years and gives us more of an opportunity to get the word out about a lot of these cases that may not be as well known in a lot of cases. So maybe, 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe, I had been a big fan of Missing Maura Murray and the Missing podcast. And so I reached out to the two of you and, kind of went from there. And I started doing research for some of your cases on the Missing podcast. And here we are again.
We're back. So you said you tend to lean into the topics that people sometimes shy away from. That includes serial killers, but you try to get in a little deeper. What is it about that you really want to get out of? I know you said you want to try to help and you want to try to make sense of things, but when you find that piece of information, how do you know that that's it? You know what I mean? Like, how do you know, like, oh, that's the thing that kind of puts some details together?
So I think that's part of it, that it's not always just one thing, or that one thing can be different in every single case. And so, I've always been big into problem solving and puzzle solving. And a lot of these cases are just that. It's a matter of finding the different pieces to the puzzle and trying to fit it together. I think trying to understand some of these offenders that essentially really are impossible to understand, but trying to get a better idea of what can lead to this type of behavior and what we can do to maybe intervene early on. And then also looking at it from the victim aspect and victims' families, who oftentimes go years or a lifetime forever without getting answers that they long for. And so I really like looking into these cases and trying to find, maybe pieces that haven't been put into the puzzle yet, or trying to help put them together a little bit more to get that better understanding and be able to then use it and look at other cases and say, okay, here may be some similarities, or here may be, what makes this one different.
Very cool. Definitely interesting stuff. And just last week, we heard some victim impact statements in the trial of the state of Idaho versus Brian Kohberger. And those impact statements were pretty emotional, but he really didn't speak. Was that surprising to you that Kohberger didn't speak?
So to start off with, those the victim impact statements during that sentencing hearing, like you said, were very emotional and were probably some of, if not the most, I think, impactful statements that I've heard. I wasn't really surprised that he didn't speak. I kind of expected it. I was hoping for some of the victims' families who want some of those answers from him. I was hoping that maybe he would. I know a lot of people were hoping that it would be part of the plea deal to make him answer those questions and talk about why, and did he act alone? Where is the murder weapon? Why these kids? I was hoping that maybe some of them would get some answers that they were looking for, but again, I wasn't surprised. I think that may have been kind of his way of keeping it in his court, on his own terms. He may come out and speak later. There's been talk about an interview with one of his former professors. And so maybe it will be something like that. But I think it will be on his terms and what he wants to put out there and what he wants to keep under, his own terms, and keep that as a kind of control in the situation, since he really lacks any additional control in the case.
So he would be having an interview with his professor, like his professor would be sitting in with him, or the professor would be interviewing him?
From what I've heard, and I don't know exactly how this would be, but I have heard that it would possibly be his former professor interviewing him.
Geez, yeah, I'm not too confident, though, that we're ever going to hear anything that's satisfying about why he did what he did. In fact, I'm very confident that we'll never hear anything satisfactory.
Yeah, like what would the professor even hit him with? Like, what hard-hitting questions would the professor have for him that people would take and say, that makes a lot of sense now?
Right, I agree with that. Even if he does talk, I don't think it will, anything will be satisfactory.
What would the revelation be?
Right. In a lot of these cases, the offenders, you can't believe what they say anyways, right? So even if he does come out and talk, who's to say that it's the truth in any aspect of it? And it doesn't change things. It doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't make what he did any better or really even more understandable. So I don't know that even if he does talk, it really makes a difference.
Today, with you, Maryann, we're not going to be speaking too much about Kohberger. We are going to be speaking about the BTK, otherwise known as Dennis Rader, Ted Bundy, and a little bit about Jeffrey Dahmer. So these guys did speak at their trial or sentencing. So we want to go over some of those and dissect their statements and what we find interesting.
I think I would like to start with Dennis Rader, BTK. He's the one that kind of got me on this track of looking into statements that are made by some of these serial killers and, the way they say things and what they say and what it might mean.
Very good. And what did he have to say at his trial or sentencing?
Rader took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. His case was a little bit different than some others in that he was convicted of or pled guilty to 10 murders that happened over a several year period of time, and then wasn't caught until several years later. Once he was caught, he ended up agreeing to plead guilty to these 10 murders in exchange for the death penalty being taken off of the table. So he would spend the rest of his life in prison. And so part of his plea agreement involved him discussing some of the specifics of each of the crimes. So during his hearing, which ultimately was similar to some of those recent hearings that we've seen with Kohberger when, he pled guilty. But sometimes they get into details of the crimes during these hearings and other times they don't. But with his, he had to recall some of the specifics of each one of the crimes in a way to sort of show that he was, in fact, the person who committed these crimes and wasn't just pleading guilty for whatever reason. But also, I think, to allow some of the surviving family members as well as the public to kind of see what he had to say about all of these crimes. During that hearing, they went through and the judge brought up each count, each charge, and he went into kind of details about each crime that took place, each murder that he committed, kind of the planning that he did for it, any thinking that went on ahead of time. This ended up being a transcript that was dozens of pages long. So it wasn't just a brief statement that was made. It was, details about each one of those murders that took place.
So is this something that he's speaking about right there in the court?
Yes.
In front of family members and...
Yes.
Okay.
So he's communicating directly with the judge. Yep. He has his attorneys there, the prosecutors are there, and then anyone else who was present in the courtroom at the time.
Mr. Rader, I need to find out more information. On that particular day, the 15th day of January, 1974, can you tell me where you went to kill Mr. Joseph Otero?
I think it's 1834, Edgemore.
All right. Can you tell me approximately what time of day you went there?
Somewhere between 7 and 7:30.
This particular location, did you know these people?
No, that was part of my, my what you call fantasy. These people were selected.
You were engaged in some kind of fantasy during this period of time?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, when you use the term fantasy, is this something you were doing for your personal pleasure?
Sexual fantasy, sir.
I see. So you went to this residence, and what occurred then?
I had did some thinking on what I was going to do to either Mrs. Otero or Josephine, and basically broke into the house, or didn't break into the house, but when they came out of the house, I came in and confronted the family, and then we went from there.
All right. Had you planned this beforehand?
To some degree, yes. After I got in the house, I lost control of it, but it was, in back of my mind, I had some ideas what I was going to do, but I basically panicked that first day. So,
beforehand, did you know who was there in the house?
I thought Mrs. Otero and the two kids, the two younger kids, were in the house. I didn't realize Mr. Otero was going to be there.
All right. How did you get into the house, Mr. Rader?
I came through the back door, cut the phone lines, waited at the back door, had reservations about even going or just walking away, but pretty soon the door opened and I was in.
They do allow him to speak pretty freely. It just goes back and forth between the judge and Dennis Rader, where he starts with the murder of the Otero family, which was the first murders that he committed. He has to say that he maliciously, intentionally, and with premeditation killed each of the victims. The judge says, all right, Mr. Rader, I need to find out more information on that particular day, the 15th day of January, 1974. Can you tell me where you went to kill Mr. Joseph Otero? And so they go through, he provides what he thinks is the address. In several of these, he doesn't have the exact address memorized, or he's incorrect on it. And so in some of them, one of the attorneys comes back and says, well, this is actually the correct address where it occurred. But they have to verify that it happened within that county to ensure that they're in the proper court jurisdiction for each of these cases. And then he goes through and says how he chose his targets and how he got into the homes and committed the murders and what he did and how he left, and kind of goes through that for each of the victims.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Really interesting in like an academic sense, as far as like studying his behavior, what deterred him, what brought him there, things like that. He does go into quite a bit of detail and very disturbing details on how he murdered the Otero family.
And again, it's also interesting because, like I said, it was several years later that he was apprehended. And so obviously several years after the crimes were committed that he is discussing them. You know, even if he did have a bit of time to think about it and prepare, he is pretty detailed in these statements. And so it's just kind of interesting to see how he remembers a lot of these details, and he remembers specifically what happened in each of these crimes. And he recites the details as if he's talking about, you know, an errand that he ran last week or what he had for lunch yesterday. Is just has a very flat affect, and like he's just very routine about these horrible crimes that he committed and what these victims went through, but he shows no emotion. He shows no remorse. He's just going through, you know, citing what happened instead of, there's no apologies, there's not much of anything there.
Now, is that by design? Do you think that he had the inkling to maybe say, I'm sorry for having to give these graphic details, but I have to be as detailed as possible? He had the option to say that, right?
Right. I think he could have put that in anywhere, and he chose not to. Yeah.
But delivering it as if like he's reading off a shopping list with no like inflection and no real emotion behind it, is that a way to unnerve people, or is that a way to maybe downplay it? Do you think he's trying to downplay it? So, hey, it's not that big of a deal, or what? Or is he just like really a psychopath?
I don't think he was trying to downplay it, because I think he maybe doesn't think that there's a whole lot wrong with what he did. But also, I think this was his way of maintaining control over the situation, over his life. A lot of his crimes involved being in control, having that control over the victims. There was a lot of bondage that took place. That was also part of his fantasy aspect of it, was tying people up. And so he had the control in most of these situations. And so I think this was his way of maintaining that control within the courtroom, even though that's supposed to be a place where, you know, he's not the one in control, and this is in an institutional setting. He's taking this opportunity to almost put on a performance. And I think he was trying to essentially set up how he appears to the public, how he appears in the media, how he will be remembered. Because here we are, you know, several years later again, and we're talking about it, right? And so, right. You know, essentially we're kind of, I guess, feeding into that. But I think that's what he wanted, was people to be talking and to say, oh, you know, he was able to just stand up there and talk about it like it was nothing. But that was his way of kind of legacy building. And he came up with the moniker BTK to carry that on and to be able to continue the media talking about him, and how he's portrayed was kind of put in his hands in a way in this.
Yeah, that's incredible to me, because we're seeing it to reference the Kohberger trial, we're seeing it with him as well. Like, he is also showing some level of control in his non-responses, in his not even non-responses, but his non-shifting in his chair, like his nothing. It's just a stone figure sitting there, occasionally like blinking, occasionally maybe like moving his head a little bit, but you said control a few times, and it's all about the control that BTK had over his victims, Dennis Rader had over his victims, also the control he had over the people that didn't know he was doing this. So he's like really thriving off of all this control, and then he furthers it and puts an exclamation point on it at his trial by delivering this like emotionless account of what he did, when in everybody else's head it's like horrific. You know, you read it and you just like, it's hard to finish like what he's talking about, but it's no problem for him. So yeah, it is this whole control thing, and I think it does go into what they say, if they say anything, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with Kohberger. Like, you want to go off on me and, you know, get it out of your system, that's fine. It's not really affecting me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some real psychosis there.
Exactly. I agree with that. Yeah. A lot of violent offenders, it is about that aspect of control more than anything. You know, a lot of rapists and sexual assault offenders, it's not necessarily about the actual sexual part of it. It is about that control over another person. And so, yeah, in these situations where, like you said, with Kohberger and the victim impact statements, they were extremely impactful, yet he sat there trying to, like you said, not move, not show any emotion, just kind of seem like this isn't affecting me at all. Deep down, it may have been, but that's what he wants people to think is, you know, it's not affecting him. How can he do this and not have, how can we say these things and him show no reaction? But that's his way, again, of saying, I'll react to what I want to. I'll react to things that make me react, not what you want me to react to and what you are saying about it.
I just looked it up then. I didn't realize he was still alive in prison.
BTK?
Yeah, he's 80.
Yeah, this wasn't even that long ago. This was 2005. He was, I guess it's 20 years ago.
I know. I thought the same thing when I saw it. I'm like, oh, that's not
like
too bad.
5 years ago. But yeah, speaking about that level of control, and just looking at the others that we're gonna speak about, Ted Bundy seems like more of a control freak than both of these guys combined. Because
like that's on the way end of the spectrum.
Yeah, because he was his own lawyer, and I was watching some of the video of his last day in trial. My God, I couldn't listen to much of it because it's all bullshit.
And apparently, it made no difference to the jury that the girl Andy Anderson saw was not wearing a coat when we know Kimberly Leach was. He saw that little girl being taken across the street in April, and months later thought he saw an abduction that occurred in February. And yet somebody bought it. The jury bought it. But I don't buy it. I was not convicted by this jury. A name was convicted. I was not convicted by this jury, but a publicity-created symbol. And the prosecution, contrary to the oft-stated cliche that they had to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, didn't have that burden. Let's not fool ourselves. Now, you're going to pass sentence on me today, but the sentence was passed months ago. As a result of publicity, suspicion, and fear, and a desire for vengeance, and while I may bear the awesome consequences of what you are about to do, I bear none of the guilt, and I bear none of the responsibility, because I did not kill Kimberly Leach.
At least with Rader, it seems like, you know, you can learn a little bit about how he got into the house and how he approached them and things like that. Like, you know, those details are terrifying. They sound like a horror movie where he's waiting outside the house. But with Bundy, like, you get no honest reaction at all. He's just saying that he was railroaded, basically. And the facts presented as facts are lies.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. Bundy is very manipulative, puts on one face, but he's different underneath that. But yeah, he never would admit to or talk about being sick or evil, whereas BTK, well, he didn't describe himself as sick or evil either. He kind of talks more about fantasies that he had and then wanting to carry out those fantasies. I think Bundy was a little bit similar in that aspect. He did a final interview right before his execution where he talks a lot about the influence of violent pornography and kind of blames a lot of what he did or how he got started in committing these violent crimes was because he got access to initially, more softcore pornography. And then from there, he had viewed some more and more violent pornography, and that just kind of desensitized him to it, I guess, and then led him into actually committing that behavior himself. So he does a lot of talk about, you should watch what you put out there in the media and these violent movies and violent video games and, that sort of thing is what can lead somebody to be just like him.
Right.
And what scares and appalls me, Dr. Dobson, is when I see what's on cable TV, some of the movies, some of the violence in the movies that come into homes today with stuff that they wouldn't show in X-rated adult theaters 30 years ago. This stuff...
The slasher movies that you're talking about.
That stuff is, I'm telling you, from personal experience, the most, that is graphic violence on screen, particularly as it gets into the home to children who may be unattended or unaware that they may be a Ted Bundy who has that vulnerability to that predisposition to be influenced by that kind of behavior, by that kind of movie, that kind of violence.
Play Grand Theft Auto and then you're Ted Bundy.
Right.
It's absurd to say that back when Bundy was, what was that, the 80s when he was tried? Because there's more pornography, violent or otherwise, at people's fingertips now than when he said that. So by his definition, wouldn't there be just hundreds or thousands of serial killers just out there roaming the streets if that makes a serial killer?
Right, exactly. Because he even admits that he grew up in a decent household, a decent Christian household, but then everything is blaming it on other factors. He does not take responsibility in any way, whereas Rader is obviously taking responsibility and providing, the information about it, but with no remorse whatsoever. It's kind of just, here's the facts of what happened, but he doesn't feel bad about it either.
I always took exception to the judge in Bundy's case when he kind of compliments him and says, I wish you took a different path. I forgot, I haven't watched it in a little while, but he says something like, I wish you took a different path, partner. You would have made a good lawyer if you were on our side, or something like that. And I why are you even giving him that, giving him any of that? You're a judge. Why are you giving your opinion on this guy? He's guilty of of serial murder. Why are you giving him any sort of your compassion or endorsement? I wish you picked a different path because you would have made a good lawyer. What are you talking about?
Right, because he's not going to be rehabilitated after that and come back and be a prosecutor.
Yeah. Call Bundy and Bundy, Esquire.
But in watching the video, I have to say, he had the mannerisms of being a trial lawyer down. Probably because he is that chameleon type that we always hear about, where he's just watching and mimicking, essentially.
Showmanship there.
Yeah, exactly. He's folding papers on the desk as he's speaking. Okay, why do those papers have to be folded as such for you to finish your point? You can see just from his physical mannerisms that he's all full of shit, actually.
Well, that's probably why the judge was you'd fit right in.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Then he proposes to his girlfriend on the stand, right?
Carol, do you want to marry me?
Yes.
And I want to marry you?
Yes.
And I do want to marry you.
He said you did.
That must have been a wild trial to be on the jury.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you're seeing history right there.
I feel like it sounds like it would be entertaining, but actually watching it, like you can't watch that much of it. Like we'll play a little clip here in this episode, but like I think our listeners may agree that it's just like you can sense the bull, and it's just all like you're just like giving this guy time of day, and you don't want to, like, you know. So it's kind of like I'm just gonna shut this off.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why you'd watch this is if you wanted to learn something about it to apply it to other people. Now, did he give like a final statement at the end? Or am I confusing that with like his closing argument or something?
So with Bundy, that was an interview, I want to say like the night before his execution.
Right. So that was the one where he blamed pornography.
Right. And then I think his final words or final statement right prior to his execution were something like, "Please give my love to my friends and family," or something like that.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. But I have to say, Dahmer came off kind of authentic in his brief speech. And it's only a few minutes. Might as well play the whole thing in the podcast episode.
Your Honor, it is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick. The doctors have told me about my sickness, and now I have some peace. I know how much harm I have caused. I tried to do the best I could after the arrest to make amends, but no matter what I did, I could not undo the terrible harm I have caused. My attempt to help identify the remains was the best that I could do, and that was hardly anything. I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate. I know I will be in prison for the rest of my life. I know that I will have to turn to God to help me get through each day. I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a holocaust. Thank God there will be no more harm that I can do. I decided to go through this trial for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was to let the world know that these were not hate crimes. I wanted the world in Milwaukee, which I deeply hurt, to know the truth of what I did. I didn't want unanswered questions. All the questions have now been answered. I wanted to find out just what it was that caused me to be so bad and evil. But most of all, Mr. Boyle and I decided that maybe there was a way for us to tell the world that if there are people out there with these disorders, maybe they can get some help before they end up being hurt or hurting someone. I think the trial did that. I take all the blame for what I did. I hurt many people. I've hurt my mother and father and stepmother. I love them all so very much. I hope that they will find the same peace I am looking for. I know I will be in prison. I pledge to talk to doctors who might be able to find some answers. In closing, I just want to say that I hope God has forgiven me. I know society will never be able to forgive me. I know the families of the victims will never be able to forgive me for what I have done. I have seen their tears, and if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry. I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration.
Yeah, like, he does apologize. He says that he actually didn't want to do it, or he wanted to be stopped, which is seems like kind of a rare thing. And he does call himself, what does he say, evil, or...
I believe he said he knew he was sick or evil or both.
Yeah.
and that now he knows that he was sick. So, right, he seems to be kind of on the other end of the spectrum where he is remorseful. And he is saying that, he thinks it was due to mental illness that he committed the crimes, but that he wants everyone to know that, he's sorry for it, and, try to let the public know that if anybody else has these sort of mental health issues, that, to try to get help before it ultimately goes down the path that he went down.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because he does kind of go through his thought process on why he decided to speak at the trial or go, get to this point, and saying, like, I knew I was something here. I knew I was sick. I knew I was evil. I knew I was both. And then he even credits the doctors by saying, the doctors told me that I have this sickness, and the trial actually is helping him to understand that. And if this was an act, he really pulled it off, because it is genuine. It does seem very genuine. He apologizes to the city. I mean, he apologizes to the world, and then he apologizes to the city of Milwaukee, and tries to clarify that these weren't hate crimes, because he was primarily focused on, and the victims were young homosexual men of color and non-white individuals. It could easily be construed that he is preying on people who are of color, homosexual, but he kind of went out of his way to say that these weren't hate crimes, which is really another fascinating part to me, because that means, like, he was just going for the more vulnerable individuals in these circles where he could mimic them and get them to trust him. And if that happened to be at a gay club that a certain type of clientele was at, well, that's just where he was getting the victims. He really, like, separates that there, that these weren't, don't try to make this into a hate crime thing. Interesting. There's a whole lot that's in this statement, in this very short statement, that I find fascinating.
Right. And I think that in him trying to clarify that they were not hate crimes, that also goes to show that he really did care. I don't necessarily want to say what people thought of him, but he wanted them to know exactly why these crimes took place and why those victims were selected, and so that it wasn't misconstrued why those particular victims were chosen.
In a way, I feel like we could have learned a whole lot from him, because I feel like he would have been more forthcoming than someone like Dennis Rader in terms of revisiting crimes and trying to figure things out, and I don't know, maybe publishing some writings that he did or he would do on them. So I feel like his murder in prison was, I'm not going to ever say that it's justified or not justified, but I feel like he could have given us some more education than some of the other people who are in there now, living into their 80s and 90s, not really providing any further knowledge that can be used as education to try to prevent this in the future. Like, what's D'Angelo doing now? He's, like, super sick, just, like, hanging on by a thread. He doesn't give a shit. He's not trying to explain the psychology behind, his upbringing and how that led him to do what he did. But I feel like Dahmer would have.
Yeah, I kind of think you're right there. Yeah, and we spoke about Scott Kimball just a few weeks ago, who was convicted of 4 murders, and he won't lead authorities towards the fourth body intentionally. He's another one of those type who are exerting their control by just not giving up the location. So yeah, I do think you're right, because Dahmer, now I don't think he could have necessarily been rehabilitated, but he at least knew what he did was wrong and apologized. And yeah, I do feel like we could have gotten some more authenticity out of him than some of these other bozos.
Right.
He probably would have educated himself in prison, probably would have got some sort of degree, maybe in psychology or something. What a crazy world we live in, where we're speculating about Jeffrey Dahmer's contribution to society had he not been murdered in prison after being imprisoned for the murder of several young men. Oh, and the cannibalism.
Out of the 4 that we spoke about, he's the only one with a positive, reaction, really.
Yeah. Even if it's not genuine, at least he put the thought into it to make it seem like it.
Right. That's what I was going to say, compared to Joseph D'Angelo, who also, quote unquote, apologized at his hearing. Although it was just, I think one sentence of saying that he listened to the victim impact statements and he's sorry to everyone that he had hurt.
I've listened to all your statements, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
But that didn't seem very genuine. And even if it wasn't much of anything that was going to make anybody feel better or feel like he really was remorseful. And in fact, I know he went into the courtroom and I believe even into the initial interrogations and questioning, acting as though he was very frail and weak and sick. But when he had been under surveillance just a couple of weeks before that, I believe he was seen out there like racing motorcycles or something and doing all of these things. And then all of a sudden, when he was being questioned for these crimes, he is, this old, frail person who, can barely speak. So I think that was probably an act as well.
Yes, nail that. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I remember that as well. He was riding his motorcycle. I want to say they observed him riding at around 90 miles per hour, like the week before he was arrested, something like that.
We did speak about the process that happens when people have been put on trial and they take a plea deal. Is it always the case where they have to give a statement if they take a deal? Or can they say, I'm going to take this plea deal, but I'm not going to speak?
No, there are different conditions under different plea deals. Essentially, it is usually under the discretion of the prosecutor who is, making this deal. So in some cases, the prosecution's not required to consult with the victims or victims' families. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I think they don't even tell them until after the deal has already been made. So in some cases, they may put it as part of the plea bargain that they have to make some sort of statement, or they have to, in order for the deal to go through, they may have to show where the last body was buried or give some sort of information. But then in other cases, it may be a matter of things like avoiding the death penalty. So agreeing to, if you plead guilty, then you'll spend the rest of your life in prison and the death penalty's off the table. Sometimes it may be to decrease or reduce the charges, which then essentially usually reduces the punishment as well. But typically under the discretion of the prosecutor on what they decide to make part of that deal.
All right. Do you think that we're ever going to hear from Kohberger?
I don't know. Like we said, even if we do, I don't know that it will be what everybody's wanting to hear. I don't know that we'll be satisfied after the fact either. So I almost think it's better off that we don't. But again, as an academic, and he was an academic as well, working on his PhD in the same thing that I have mine in. So that aspect of it interests me as well. If he were to, maybe share if that's why he got into the field or things like that. Because a lot of times with, again, the topics that I study and research, I get a sideways look from people sometimes, like, well, why would you want to look into cases like that? Is there something wrong with you? And then this happens and it's like, well, we're not all like that. So.
Yeah, no, I think we can relate to, as being true crime podcasters. Sometimes, if someone doesn't know exactly what you're all about, it can seem a little dark or something. And it can be dark at times, but right. Yeah, just now, before we go here, Maryann, I think this has been a great conversation, but I am curious about Kohberger and that degree that you and him both share. Was that strange for you when you first heard that, or was that like, oh, I could see that? There's a couple people in my class like that. I wouldn't be surprised if. What was your read on that?
No, I truly was surprised by that. Yeah, it did make me think back to my days in grad school, and it's a lot of work, and so I don't know. I think he thought he was going to get away with it, and he was going to be able to continue on to teaching college classes about the very things that he was secretly doing. And again, holding that power of, you don't know what I know.
Well, thank God he wasn't smart enough to fully realize his entire vision, if you're correct.
Right. Yep. Not as smart as he thought he was.